So this tutorial will cover both adding your own vaulting animations as well as customizing the setup for the existing animations. I don't have a custom vaulting animation on hand, so I'm just going to take the 250 and we're going to pretend it's a new animation. Call it custom 250. So if I open it up, the only thing you need to do is enable root motion, but for now leave it disabled. It will make it easier to set up because you can see what's going on a lot easier if he's actually moving. So we right click, create, and a montage, and open it up. So where it's got default group, default slot, we want to change this to the vault slot. And he's going to just stop and we reopen him. Okay. So the next thing we need is a marker. We want it near the end, but do not put it all the way at the end or it won't trigger. And it's just called stop. Without this, it tries to loop and you'll get some really weird blending. So this is also where the animation stops. So if I put it here, he'll start blending out from here and possibly fail the vault. But it is a helpful way to kind of control that blend. Speaking of blending, Hermite Cubic tends to give very nice results. It's almost linear but with a bit of ease in and out. So I just default to that option. Now going into a 250 volt, we don't want to lose too much of the root motion, so we want a quick blend. If you had, say, a quadruped that goes all the way up into its hind legs really quickly, you might want 0.2 or something just so, but we'll test all that later. The blend out's pretty excessive, or maybe not for a 250, but we will see. I'll show you how to check all that later. So now, the other thing we need is just right click on the right on here, go add notify state, motion warping. You don't need to change any settings. Those are all set up for you. No need to touch a thing. Now grab this and let it snap to the stop. If it doesn't snap onto that stop, you can get a bit of a snap at the end of the vault animation, and it definitely shouldn't exceed it. So all throughout this motion warping notify, it's going to modify the root motion. It's going to scale it to the actual vault height. So where that scaling takes place, like right here, doesn't make too much sense because he's just getting started. He's not actually moving much. But when he starts moving, like you could do it there, but then he pauses here. So most of it occurs around here. So if we have motion warping where he's not moving much, it's actually going to cause him to move when his feet should be planted. So we can try it from about there. And it might even pay to go through the included animations and adjust them and see if you get some nicer results, because they were set up for a mannequin, just a generic character, proof of concept. For a highly polished product, you would probably want nicer animations anyway, so yeah. And with this, we can already take this animation, open up as blueprint, and just take the custom 250, and now we'll use that instead. So we have to enable root motion. And this is set to 235, which means it will use the 250. So it used our custom one. but it does look a little different from the normal one, and that's because of the blending. So here's how you test your blend settings properly. Slow-mo 0.2 or 0.1, and that's a 0 to 1 range. So this isn't too helpful. We go Edit, Project Settings, Motion Blur, and just disable that. Now when he moves, there's no blurring. So we're going to just put him back in idle and hit Vault. So it blends into it very nicely. So 0.1 was the right value. His feet stay planted. And let's see how he blends out. So yeah, the blend out is taking too long. He's back into a running animation when he's blending out. So we can play with two things here. We've got a blend out time, so we can set that to 0.1 and test that. We'll do it back in slow-mo 0.1. You can actually just hit up instead of retyping it. So that's a lot nicer, but his feet still kind of move around a bit. So the other thing we can do is adjust where the stop is. Now I've moved the stop, but this won't snap. After moving the stop, I find I have to deselect and reselect it, and then it snaps again. So we've moved that back a bit, we've changed the blend rate. Just press up and V for Vault. Let's see how this looks. So it's the blend out we're looking for. So that's a lot better. So now we just want to see how it looks in real time. Not too bad, but now in real time we see it's actually happening a little quick. So let's up the blend out rate. So it looks a lot nicer. It doesn't have that sudden snap. And at 10% rate. Here we go. So yeah, that's a lot better. So that's how you control the blending and getting really nice results. Now, the other thing is you'll notice his hands are just wherever the heck they want to be, and his foot. By default, it's not set up to support foot IK. You notice a setup how we have left hand, right hand, both hands. If you chuck a foot into the mix, it's totally doable. It just gets a bit convoluted. And it really is up to you. So we add two notify tracks. We look here. Right here is where his hands plant on the surface. And you can tell because he flexes his fingers as they press down on the surface. So we go add notify state, FBIK. We do it underneath as well for the other hand. And we want to find where they then release. Getting close, right here. So as they start unflexing and his weight comes off them, we want the IK to release before they start lifting off, otherwise it's going to keep them pinned when it shouldn't. So you'll notice these are not the defaults, and that's just the weird way that notifies get set up, is that I can only change these settings after they're created. But these are set up properly. Keep the defaults. You can change the LOD, but make sure to change your control rig in the animation graph as well. Actually, 2 is a bit aggressive, 3 might be more appropriate. So now the other thing we need to do is just change this to hand L. And we can debug trace during play in editor. so we can see what kind of trace it's doing. We'll give this a little more width to play with. Let's play. And we'll do the same thing with firmware 0.1. Do it from a distance. There we are. So you'll notice that trace is flickering, and it's also just completely missed for the other matter. So the IK never triggered. Let's go back into here. So these have a setting, tick skip amount, meaning that every fourth tick, it's going to tick, skip 3 ticks, and then tick again, which makes it reasonably inaccurate, but helps with performance. So I just do the same thing as before. Sorry. So now we do that again. So the right hand's planted for a moment, and then it's come back off. So the FBIK traces, they have quite a few settings we can use to basically impact the result. So the trace radius, we just set this to 30, like, okay, we really want it to hit something. But yeah, so it was on for a bit, but then it came off. So this will help with irregular terrain a lot, and that's mostly where you need it. But the thing is, there are other ways we can get it to give us better results. Now, we can't really change where it's positioned so much. There are a few things we can do. We can keep increasing the trace radius. And why not? We really want it to land on the surface. This might be a way to accomplish that. And hand interpolate towards it. They just don't have that much time. So coming back into here, the trace length is pretty self-explanatory, and it's quite high as well. So let's pull this down just so you can see. The other setting I wanted to talk about is bone offset is 10. So if it lands on a surface and it was 0, the hands would penetrate that surface. So this just lifts them up off it a bit. Disable if hit fails. So you'll notice how we got a result on the right hand and the left hand right there. So as soon as these hits start to fail, it's just going to use the old location. So they're actually going to where they were before, and then it disables it when it reaches the end of the notify. So long as it got any hit at all, it will use that location until it gets a new one. Now, you can disable that behavior just by checking this. Trace type. So for the local player, as in you, it uses the geometry, which is a more expensive trace. For other players, it uses the actual collision mesh that he walks on. So it's slightly less accurate, but I mean, it gets a reasonably the same result, and it's much more performant. But for the local player, we'll take the quality. So update type, we can do a single update. And I'll show you what that does, if you haven't figured it out. There is a single trace, and it's not going to keep trying. So he's still getting warped to the location, but until the notify ends, he's pinned to the one and only trace. Now, you might think, well, that's terrible. But what if instead of starting here, we started here? Or just wherever we're likely to get a good original hit. That means we only do one trace, which is a lot more performant, but may not get such Nice result. So what you do is up to you. Generally, the default settings work reasonably well. So that covers customizing the full body IK reasonably in depth. It tells you how to set up the motion warping. It impresses on you that you really need to have this stop section. You absolutely must have it, or your results will not be nice to you. And we use the Vault slot. We've set up blend options as Hermite Cubic, and you can play with these, do the slow-mo thing and just see what looks best for your animations on your character, because everything's different. Same with the blend time. Okay, so the one final thing to mention. If I come into Greystone's blueprint, you'll notice these animations are arrays. We can add more. So what does this mean? If we add multiple 250 height animations, and it could be the same one with different motion warping and different FBIK settings if you like, and it will randomize between them, and it's net synchronized randomization. It will never play a different animation between the client and server. Okay, that concludes this tutorial, and thank you for watching.